want you to think about kind of a bizarre paradox it's hidden right in plain sight.
Oh, okay. A paradox.
Yeah, right? Because the most common everyday phrases we use in English, they are actually like deliberately designed to avoid communicating direct information.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Think about it. You walk into a coffee shop,
Right.
right? You see someone you know, and they say, "What's up?" And like without even missing a single beat, you just go, "Not much, you."
Yeah, the classic reflex.
Exactly. But you could have literally just, I don't know, won the lottery or
Yeah.
gotten fired or like discovered a new planet. And your reflex is still just not much. You
Yeah.
just exchanged zero actual data, but somehow, a vital social contract was just completely fulfilled.
It's honestly the linguistic equivalent of like two computers sending a ping across a network. Just to verify the connection is still alive.
Oh, I like that.
Right.
A ping.
Yeah. The content of the packet doesn't matter at all. The response itself is the entire point. You are basically confirming that you see each other and that the social baseline is stable.
And that tension,
Right.
right? That tension between what words literally mean on paper and what they're actually doing in the real world, that is our mission for this deep dive.
Mhm.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are looking at a really fascinating piece from Linguvia today. They're a platform built to help people learn English, as they say, their way every day.
Right.
And the specific post we're digging into is called 50 Essential English Phrases for Daily Life. But, and this is important, we are not going to read this like a high school vocabulary
Oh,
test.
no, please. No flashcards today.
No flashcards. We are looking at this as a sociological survival guide, really. We are decoding the hidden matrix of human interaction.
That sounds intense, but it's accurate.
Because, surviving the real world isn't about just knowing the dictionary definition of a word.
Mhm.
It is entirely about knowing how to construct boundaries, shift power dynamics, manage expectations, and doing all of that while sounding, perfectly polite.
Yeah, and the structural mechanics behind these phrases are just fascinating because when you transition from studying textbook grammar to actually speaking with real humans in the wild, you quickly realize that language is, above all else, a social tool.
Right.
These phrases are mechanisms. They're like levers we pull to, modulate the distance between ourselves and other people, depending entirely on the stakes of the environment we're in.
Well, let's start with the lowest stakes environment then,
Yeah.
which the source material identifies as the casual sphere, so the social dance of friends and acquaintances.
Okay, yeah.
We just talked about that. What's up? Pink. But the Linguvia text maps out this whole sliding scale of greetings. You have your standard sort of face. How's it going?
Which usually prompts a slightly more substantive, pretty good, thanks.
Right, all the way down to that purely reflexive, what's up? But the real mechanics reveal themselves once you are past the greeting and you're into the actual flow of the conversation.
Oh, the transitional phrases.
Yes, the source points out transitional phrases like, speaking of which. And I think this one is brilliant because it functions exactly like a clutch in a manual transmission car.
Oh, wow, yeah, clutch.
Yeah.
It disconnects the engine from the wheels just long enough for you to change gears without completely stalling out the car.
Right. It allows you to take whatever random data point the other person just threw out there, grab it, and use it to just pivot directly to the thing you actually want to talk about.
But without making them feel like you just ignored them.
Exactly. You validate their input while completely hijacking the direction of the conversation.
It's very stealthy. And you maintain the illusion of this spontaneous, organic flow. But, keeping that connection alive eventually requires talking about the future. And this brings up the phrases the text categorizes under making plans.
Okay, here's where I actually have to push back a little bit on the source, or at least on how we categorize these.
Oh, let's hear it.
So the source lists, are you free this weekend? As a classic starting point for casual planning. That makes total sense to me. It asks for a specific window of availability.
Sure.
But then it lists, let's catch up sometime, in that exact same category of casual planning. And to me, let's catch up sometime isn't a plan at all.
You don't think so?
No. It feels like the ultimate polite exit strategy. It's the phrase you deploy when you want to end an interaction right now, but you don't want to actually commit to ever seeing the person again.
Okay, I see your point. But I would argue it is both an exit strategy and a genuine social placeholder.
A placeholder.
Yeah. I mean, you are right that it lacks any concrete logistical data. There's no time, no location, no agenda. But that ambiguity isn't necessarily a polite lie. It is a prioritization of warmth over logistics.
Oh, interesting. Warmth over logistics.
In casual English, we actually use vagueness all the time to protect the relationship. Think about it. If you say, let's get coffee next Tuesday at 2 p.m., and the other person is just totally overwhelmed with the work, you've just forced them to reject you.
Oh, yeah. I hate having to say no to specific invites.
Right. But by saying, let's catch up sometime, you signal that the door to the relationship is open. You value their company, but you are deliberately removing the pressure of immediate obligation. It's social grease.
Huh. So you are basically putting the friendship on layaway.
Exactly.
You're reserving the right to interact later without having to pay the immediate cost of a calendar invite.
You're confirming the network connection is still good, even if you aren't ready to download the files just yet.
I love that.
Oh.
And this is a big, but that entirely shifts when we move out of the casual sphere and into the workplace.
Oh,
Because in a professional environment, vagueness is no longer a tool for warmth, right?
yeah.
It is a liability.
Yeah.
The stakes transition from simply maintaining likability to protecting your livelihood, managing your reputation, avoiding catastrophic misunderstandings.
The geometry of workplace communication requires a completely different set of levers.
Huh?
You are operating in an environment where, hierarchy, accountability, and efficiency, they're all constantly in tension with the need to maintain a harmonious team dynamic.
And the source dedicates a significant section to this, particularly around this concept of delaying tactics.
Yes, these are crucial.
Like when a boss or a colleague just drops a ridiculously complex problem right on your desk.
Yeah.
The text highlights the phrase, "Let me think about it."
Which sounds so simple.
Right. At face value, it just sounds like a simple statement of process. But structurally, it is a defensive boundary.
Mm-hmm.
It stops a requester's momentum cold. It acknowledges the weight of their request. And legally, in a corporate sense anyway, it buys you time to formulate a strategy so you don't panic and just commit to an impossible deadline.
It prevents that immediate default to yes, which gets so many people in trouble. But notice how it contrasts with the phrases used for task management in the text.
Okay, like what?
Well, when a task is straightforward and you want to signal high competence, the text suggests saying, I'll get right on it.
Yeah, that sounds super proactive.
It is. That is pure velocity.
Huh.
It communicates enthusiasm and immediate prioritization. But, and here's the interesting part, the text also pairs this with another phrase. Let me double check.
Okay, so this is the phrase that really trips me up.
Really? Why?
Because if we are talking about projecting competence, doesn't saying "let me double check" inherently project the exact opposite?
How do you mean?
Well, if leadership asks you a question about a project and your immediate reflex is to say, "Oh, let me double check," it sounds like you don't actually know the answer. It feels like an admission of ignorance.
Ah, I see. And in a different cultural context, it might be. But if we connect this to the bigger picture and analyze the specific corporate culture these English phrases evolved in, admitting a temporary lack of immediate recall is far less damaging than projecting false confidence.
Okay, that's fair.
Let me double check doesn't show ignorance. It's an assertion of rigorous standards. It tells the stakeholder that you value the integrity of the data more than your own ego.
Wow, okay.
You are essentially saying, look, I have an answer, but because your request is so important, I'm going to verify the schematics before I just hand them to you. It transforms what could be a moment of uncertainty into a display of professional responsibility.
You are managing their risk.
Precisely. You are absorbing the delay to guarantee the quality.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But the trickiest geometry in the workplace isn't actually managing tasks. It's managing conflict.
Oh, absolutely.
And the source provides a really good framework for diplomatic disagreement. Because you can't just walk into a conference room and tell your lead engineer that their idea is fundamentally broken.
No, that usually doesn't end well.
Right. You have to use respectful counters. And the text gives us, I see what you mean, but... And also, let's look at it another way.
I have to say, let's look at it another way is an absolute masterclass in psychological de-escalation.
Really? How so?
Well, when two people disagree, the natural instinct is to stand face to face in an adversarial posture. It's your idea versus my idea.
Right. Boxing match.
Yes. But by saying, let's look at it another way, you are linguistically altering the physical space. You're basically inviting the other person to stand shoulder to shoulder with you, projecting the problem out onto the table in front of both of you.
Oh, I see.
And you're examining it as a shared puzzle rather than a personal battle. You completely dissolve the ego threat.
You change it from a boxing match to, like, a collaborative dissection. It is fascinating how much heavy lifting those 6 words actually do.
It really is.
But, okay, let's shift environments again, because we've looked at the ongoing high-stakes relationships of the workplace. But what happens when we remove the long-term relationship entirely?
You mean strangers?
Yeah, when we enter the purely transactional space of interacting with strangers, specifically in retail or service environments.
Right, okay. Well, the underlying goal there shifts from relationship building to efficiency, but the requirement for politeness remains rigidly in place. You are basically navigating the modern retail social contract.
Right, so you walk into a clothing store, a clerk immediately approaches you to offer assistance. And the Linkuvia material highlights what I think is the ultimate defensive phrase, "I'm just browsing."
Oh, the classic.
The text calls it a polite way to decline help when you're looking without planning to buy. But psychologically, "I'm just browsing" does so much more than just decline help.
What do you think it does?
It is a territorial claim. It is essentially deploying a verbal invisibility cloak.
A verbal invisibility cloak.
Yeah. It establishes temporary ownership of your personal space in a commercial environment. You deploy it, and you instantly regain your autonomy.
That's a great way to put it. It clearly defines your status in the store's ecosystem. You are signaling that you are an observer, not an active participant in the sales funnel.
Right.
And the clerk recognizes that specific social code and retreats. Both parties save face, and no one actually feels rejected.
But the power dynamic completely flips when you actually need to initiate a transaction.
Yes, it does.
Like, if you need something corrected, you use formal distance. The text gives, "Could I get a refund?" It's very direct. It states the exact requirement. But if you were in a restaurant, the text points out the phrase, "What would you recommend?" And the material specifically notes that asking this shows interest in the server's opinion. And I think this is profound.
Profound.
Yeah, because in a sterile, hyper-efficient transaction where someone is literally being paid to bring you items, asking for their recommendation briefly suspends the entire transactional hierarchy.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You are granting them authority and expertise. It injects a sudden burst of humanity into a purely economic exchange.
You are acknowledging that they possess specialized knowledge of the environment that you lack. That's a really good point. And returning to the idea of boundaries, we see the same polite distance in how we are taught to decline things in just general interactions.
Right.
The text offers a spectrum here. If a suggestion works, you just drop a casual, "works for me." But if you need to decline professionally, it's, "I'm afraid I can't."
Okay, "I'm afraid I can't" is so interesting to me.
Why is that?
Because it forces you to feign emotional distress to soften the blow of the word no.
Feign emotional distress.
Yeah, I mean, you aren't actually experiencing fear. You are just padding the rejection with a layer of performative regret so the other person doesn't feel dismissed.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Performative regret. And if you want an even softer refusal, you use "maybe another time."
Which functions identically to "let's catch up sometime."
Exactly. It is a refusal wrapped in the promise of future possibility.
So we have clearly established that everyday English is heavily reliant on padding. We pad our refusals, we pad our plans, we pad our disagreements. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The final section of the source material explores what happens when that padding actually becomes a liability. Like, what happens to our language when we are vulnerable, lost, or rapidly running out of time?
This raises an important question because this is where we see the structural architecture of politeness completely stress-tested. The primary tool we use to create politeness in English is indirectness, specifically creating distance between the speaker and the request.
Okay, yeah. The source breaks down the tiers of asking for help here. Like, if you want to make a polite, considerate request, you use "would you mind," as in "would you mind holding the door?"
Right.
But if you need to make a formal inquiry, perhaps to someone in authority, you escalate to, "I was wondering if," for example, "I was wondering if I could take tomorrow off."
Look at the mechanical construction of "I was wondering if." It's fascinating. You are using the past progressive tense to ask for something in the present.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
Yeah, you don't say "I want tomorrow off" or "I'm wondering if I can have tomorrow off." You push the act of wondering into the past. "I was wondering."
Right.
By creating temporal distance, you create psychological distance. It makes the request feel much less immediate, less demanding, and it gives the listener a massive amount of space to formulate a polite refusal if they need to.
So we are literally manipulating the concept of time to avoid sounding pushy.
Exactly.
And speaking of time, the phrases we use to manage delays are incredibly fluid, aren't they?
Very fluid.
You have the standard warning, I'm running late. But for short delays, the text gives us, give me a minute, or I'll be there in a bit. And I have to say, give me a minute is almost never 60 literal seconds.
Oh, never.
It is a completely abstract metric. It just means halt your expectations until I signal otherwise.
Right. We treat time as a flexible metaphor when the stakes are low. But watch what happens to the language when urgency spikes. Compare that heavily padded, time-distorted, I was wondering if maybe it would be possible, to the phrases Linguvia lists for actual emergencies.
Yeah, it is a complete structural collapse of the padding.
Complete collapse.
If you need immediate attention, you say, excuse me, this is urgent. And if the situation is critical, the absolute emergency signal is, I need help right away.
The indirectness vanishes completely. There is no past progressive tense. There is no ambiguity. When safety or critical timelines are on the line, the cultural preference for politeness is immediately overridden by the absolute necessity for clarity.
You don't have the luxury of worrying about whether you sound demanding.
Exactly. I need help right away is stripped down to its bare linguistic chassis. Subject, verb, need, timeline. It is designed to pierce through any ambient noise or social hesitation.
You are essentially pulling the verbal fire alarm.
Yes. And everyone who hears it immediately understands that the normal rules of the social dance have been suspended.
Wow. Okay, so we have toured the matrix. We've gone from the reflexive ping of what's up through the diplomatic geometry of the boardroom all the way to the stripped clarity of a genuine emergency.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. But, understanding the mechanics of these 50 phrases doesn't mean you automatically know how to drive the car. How does someone actually operationalize this knowledge without sounding like, I don't know, an algorithm running a translation script?
Well, the Linguvia material is helpful here because it provides 3 foundational principles for moving from theory to practice. And the first one is simply context matters.
Which means adjusting your tone based on the setting and the relationship.
And I gotta say, this seems like the easiest place to completely crash the car.
Oh, absolutely. It's so common.
Like, if you take an overly formal phrase, something padded with tons of psychological distance, like, I was wondering if it would be possible, and you use it with a spouse or a best friend who is just sitting on your couch, you haven't been polite. You've actually introduced a massive amount of awkwardness. Right, because you've created a wall. Using highly elevated indirect language with someone who possesses intimate clearance with you, it signals that something is wrong.
Yeah.
It implies a sudden withdrawal of affection or like a passive-aggressive boundary. Context literally dictates the meaning of the phrase.
It's the difference between wearing a tuxedo to a gala and wearing a tuxedo to a beach bonfire.
That's a great analogy.
Right, because at the bonfire, you don't look elegant. You just look insane.
You do, which leads directly to their second principle, cultural awareness. The source emphasizes a golden rule for navigating the anxiety of context, which is, when in doubt, always err on the side of politeness.
Okay, play it safe.
Exactly. If you misjudge a situation and you are slightly too polite to appear, the worst that happens is you seem a bit stiff. And you can easily recover by just relaxing your tone. But if you misjudge the context and are far too casual with a superior or a client, recovering from that perceived disrespect is incredibly difficult.
The padding acts as a safety net.
Yes. And the final tip is simple but demanding. Practice makes perfect. They really advocate for conscious, daily integration.
So using one new phrase a day.
Exactly. Observe how native speakers react to it. Notice when they deploy the verbal clutch or the invisibility cloak.
And for you listening, if you want to push this further, the Linguvia platform offers a really massive repository of resources to practice this stuff. Their blog highlights audio immersion tracks, like a summer barbecue party, so you can actually hear casual pacing.
That's super helpful.
Yeah, and reading recommendations like The Smart Way to Learn English. Or they have these great deep dives into the mechanics of tricky words, like the endless battle between affect and effect, or accept and accept.
Because the philosophy is really that language is a muscle. You build the reflex through constant tension and release in real-world scenarios.
So what does this all mean for you? As you close this deep dive and, walk back out into the world, it means that whether you are trying to tactfully push back on a boss's terrible idea, gracefully escape a high-pressure sales clerk, or just signal to a friend that everything is fine without launching into a whole monologue, you are relying on the hidden architecture of everyday English. You are constantly pulling levers that dictate power, distance, and warmth.
And, I'd offer one final thought on the nature of practicing these phrases for everyone listening.
Uh,
There is a concept in linguistics that the structure of the language we speak actually influences how we think.
okay, wow.
Right. So if we take Linguvia's advice and we consciously force ourselves to use one of these new phrases every single day, what happens to our internal mindset?
Oh, that's deep.
If you continually practice the phrase, let's look at it another way, instead of immediately going on the attack during a disagreement, does the habit of speaking the vocabulary of diplomacy eventually rewire you to become a more diplomatic person in your daily life? Do we use the language, or does the language eventually build us?
Does the architecture shape the architect? Man, that is a really profound question to leave on. Well, thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. As you navigate your day-to-day, just pay attention to the invisible social contracts happening all around you. Listen for the padding, spot the boundaries, and watch how people manage the distance between each other. Because once you step out of the workbook and onto the sidewalk, that is where the real mechanics of human connection are hiding. Catch you next time.